All right, great. Thank you all for joining us this morning for our kickoff panel on this new series talk. And it's a hybrid kind of podcast series about NSU community health and well-being. We are just so excited for these ongoing conversations that are much needed during this crucial time since the outbreaks of the COVID-19 pandemic that have intensified already a lot of challenges across the board throughout the world, but especially in particular ways in higher education and in universities, including our own community here at Northeastern State University and our three main campuses in Tahlequah, Broken Arrow, and Muskogee, Oklahoma. And we also acknowledge that these are the ancestral and indigenous homelands of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, United Kituwa Band of Cherokee Indians, and the Muskogee Creek Nation, as well as a place that has been influenced and impressed by the convergences of many different and diverse peoples since time immemorial, and the waters and lands that make this place home and have shaped it that we navigate, whether we're conscious of it or not. So that's a part of also initiatives happening are those indigenous land acknowledgements and our places navigating these spaces. And we thank you all for joining us as we quickly turn the time over to be sure we have enough time and do the best we can to hear from these incredible panelists who consist of faculty, a part of what we've called a collective and critical mass of faculty, staff, and students that we've been collaborating with, contacting, who are concerned and involved with different issues and these efforts in supporting NSU community health and well-being. And our panelists today, which they will mostly be introducing themselves, but they include, first we'll be hearing from Dr. Jim Farrell, who is an associate professor of educational leadership. And then we'll hear from Dr. Suzanne Farmer, who is the director of the Center for Women's Studies at NSU and associate professor of history. And then we'll hear from Dr. Steve Byers, who is an associate professor of psychology and based at the Broken Arrow campus. And then we'll hear from Dr. Christine Hallman, who is a professor of geography in our political science and geography program department here at NSU. So without further ado, we'll start with Dr. Jim Farrell. And just to remind you as well, these were some questions, points of conversation that we have had on this panel before. Is one, what does community health and well-being mean to you? And what should it look like at NSU? More specifically, what have you done as faculty to support students and NSU community? And what can faculty do to support NSU community and well-being, especially since the outbreaks of the COVID-19 pandemic? What are your hopes for a talk series or a podcast like this? And what kind of conversations do you wish that we have moving forward? Thank you to our panelists for joining us, and thank you all. We'll turn the time over now to Jim Farrell. Each panelist has about 10 minutes, and we'll hopefully have some time to talk directly between each other, and I will be moderating any comments or questions in the chat. Thank you. Dr. Farrell? Dr. Farrell, is he there? Oh no, there. He froze for a little bit. Can you hear? I don't know if he hears us. Hi, Jim.
Dr. King, my internet is unstable, so why don't you go to Dr. Hallman or Dr. Farmer and I'll reconnect, okay?
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for letting us know. Technicalities, that's the reality of it. All right, Dr. Farmer, please. Oh, Dr. Farmer, you are on mute. It's all good.
Thank you. So I think we have to think about the ways that faculty can, best help students in a way that faculty only can. Most faculty members have been in a university setting for a lot of years. We've operated within a university system for years, if not decades, in my case. So in my own experience, I've attended 3 different universities, from a small regional that was even smaller than NSU to an R1 major state institution before I came to NSU. And so for me, I'm comfortable in a university setting, and I understand how it works. And, you know, and as most faculty members do, but students are rarely comfortable in a university setting. And for many, at NSU, they're the first in their family to have to navigate it. So they can't even, go to a family member. And I understand that myself as a first generation college student, but I had the benefit of the university that I chose to attend. My mother was the payroll specialist there. So she had connections, and she knew people on the campus. And so I had a first generation college student experience, but it's not a typical one, I would say, because my mom was there. And so I think this is where a knowledgeable faculty member can be kind of the best advocate in helping to find and utilize the services that we provide on campus, because we see and interact with students on a most consistent basis of anyone else on campus. And so the first thing you have to do is you have to know as a student what resource, or a faculty member, what resources are available to students. And I don't think that faculty always know that, right? Because we don't go to student orientation at NSU, and we don't participate in a lot of that. I didn't before I became director of the Center for Women's Studies. So one of the best tools for that, and I'm going to share my screen, is actually the student handbook. And I have taken the student handbook for myself, and I've kind of taken out the pages that I think best give information about, what student services we have. And, we have tutoring, and there's Blackboard. But if you get into the student handbook, each section that you go through, like there's the behavioral intervention team, and it explains what it is, what it does, the procedures, who to contact. And if you go through, there's like the Way Fund information. And so it's really kind of just this helpful resource, so that when students come to you, you don't want to just like throw information at them and run off. Because in my experience, students will come to me, and they're going to ask for a deadline extension. Usually that's how this all starts. And then they'll tell me something that's going on in their personal life, or whatever it is that has caused them not to be able to do it. With the pandemic, that happened exponentially, even though I had basically got rid of deadlines for the spring and the fall, at the kind of the peak of what we were going through. And so, we just sort of have to keep that in mind, right? But they would come to me and ask. And so sometimes I know exactly who for them to call, but I want to get down, to this last page. It goes through student support, Hawk Reach, all of this kind of stuff, the Rowdy Resource Room, all kinds of numbers. But at the very last page, there's a directory of phone numbers. And so you can give those to students, or as I do most of the time, I actually pick up the phone and call these places for the student. And if the student is still in my office and they feel comfortable with that, I will call and say, hey, I have a student, she has this issue, or he has this issue. And, can I send them over? And what that does is it lets that office know that the student is in need of help, and the particular kind of help that they may need. And that gives them time to sort of prepare and get best able to help the students, so that, the student just doesn't come into their office and then, tell them what's going on, and then they have to scramble. And so it's a way of kind of, creating that space where we can all best effectively help the student and get them what they need. And then nobody's kind of scrambling with that. So I want to say that the student handbook is like 79 pages, but I think I have 26 total of pages that I have pulled out that I just use as my personal reference for how to, navigate that. And along with that, I can stop this sharing now. So along with just that general kind of sense of knowledge, right? That lets students know that, I'm somebody that they can come to, but a way to do that before they even come to you is NSU has a basic security needs statement in the syllabus. And I had that in my syllabus for several years before the university made that an actual part of the formal syllabus. And it includes information about the Rowdy Resource Room, the Light the Way Fund, Hawk Reach. And I know that some people, you skip over certain parts of the syllabus, the formal parts of it. But that part I don't skip over. I make it a point to go over it with students. And I always tell them while we're discussing that, they're college students and they're away from home. And so they're going to find themselves in a situation, as all college students do, and they're going to need assistance on some issue or some problem that they're dealing with. And that, if they have that situation, I'm happy for them to let me know and I'll do my best to help them. So that kind of signals to students that I not only care about their well-being, but I'm somebody who knows who they can get into contact with, right? And I know how to help them. So I think that's very beneficial to know. And all that said, once I help them and I use my network, because as the Center for Women's Studies director, I interact with people in student affairs and across campus that I wouldn't normally interact with as a regular faculty member. And then I'm a member of several community organizations of women that include faculty and staff at Northeastern. And so I have built connections and networks across the campus over the last 10 years. And I don't abuse that, but if I have a student that's in need and I know somebody that can help them, then I reach out and use that kind of connection to sort of help the student and to get them the best help that they can get, because faculty are overloaded. We do a lot of work, but I've never been in an institution that cares as much about students as Northeastern. I would say that faculty at Northeastern care tremendously about their students. And it's been a struggle with the pandemic because we're tired and we have family, that we're dealing with, and, faculty have had COVID, and we're dealing with all these situations the same way that the students are. But at the same time, we have better resources to deal with it than they do. And so I really feel like the best service that we can be to them is just to let them know that we care and that we know how to help them. And if we can't do it, then we know somebody who can, and then you just put them into contact with them. But then you don't just leave them floating, right? Like you have to check up on them and email them and make sure that they're doing okay. So I think that's, oh, we have a kitty cat.
And you have about 4 more minutes, Suzanne, if there's anything you want to wrap up.
I think that's really just, it seems very basic, but that's just, that's what I do with students when they come to me for help. And I think that is really the best way that faculty can help students. You don't want to insert yourself into their personal lives in a prying kind of way. Or in an appropriate kind of way. But there are ways that we can help them and get them on track, because obviously our number one goal is for them to be successful human beings and to get a college degree and to go on and be successful. So my internet is saying that it's unstable, so I probably should stop there.
Okay, no worries. Thank you much. And I noticed some people have questions in the chat, including one about this great resource that Dr. Farmer brought up of, the sources that you have, and some are wondering, is that something that could be shared with other faculty, or, this directory, it could be handy to have. Could it be shared as a PDF somehow?
Yeah, I have it as a PDF. And so anybody is welcome to email me, farmer07. I mean, I don't want anybody to think that I just that I made this up out of thin air. It is from the student handbook, right? That's where it came from. I have added a few pages since the pandemic started. And actually, since we've been talking about doing this wellness and community health. I've added pages at the end, like from Dr. Sheila Self, where she talked about all these various resources. And I think somebody on the Facebook page had posted mental health resources. So I've added some stuff. So I'm happy to share that with anybody who would like it.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, that would be a wonderful resource and a reminder that there are these directories out there. So we can help to spread the word for faculty to turn to them. All right, Dr. Jim Farrell, are you able to connect now?
Yep, I think I'm on, so we're all good.
Thank you. Go ahead.
All right, and so actually it's probably fortuitous that it worked out this way because as Dr. Farmer talked about the well-being of students, the thing that interested me in getting involved in this discussion and seeing this happen is the different perspectives that the panelists here are going to bring to well-being. So to address some of the same stuff about students briefly, I agree. When I go over the syllabus, there are parts that we kind of skim over, but especially this last year, I highlight those things that are in the syllabus about student support systems and show them where they are in the syllabus and where they are in Blackboard. And I say that because while you deal, it sounds like, with undergraduate students, I deal with all graduate students. And so even graduate students, so we know that all our students are adults, but even graduate students, who are 30 years old and have their teaching careers going and they're working, I still encourage them during the pandemic not to be, to reach out if they need resources. And so I go through those resources in the syllabus. So I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because that is one of the things that I stress as well. And also, and this semester, I've started periodically emailing the students, just checking on their well-being and saying, hey, let me know. You can see when they start to struggle because you start to see those late assignments coming in at a little bit higher rate. So anyway, so we're going to talk about that as we go through these panel discussions, but I want to shift a little bit from the student well-being to the faculty well-being. And so that's where my perspective comes in and what I would like to see.
Oh no, I think Jim froze. Shoot, just as we were about to hear him. For some reason, I think Jim, we lost you for a minute.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. It's saying unstable. I don't know why it keeps doing that, but
it's all right. We're just saying about, you want to talk about faculty well-being.
Yeah, so I saw an article from the Oklahoma Policy Institute either earlier this week or late last week that spoke to the fact that Oklahoma is the third, unfortunately, we're number 3 in the country for cutting funding to higher ed. And so with that, I look at the stressors that come with being a faculty member. And, when we tell the public that we're college professors, I think they see us as having it all, but there are a lot of stressors that definitely come with being a faculty member. And so one of my concerns is faculty well-being. So just like reaching out to the students, reaching out to faculty and asking faculty, what kind of support do you need? How is your semester going? As department chair, it's a little bit easier to do that, but still we can do that as a team. But I think a lot of faculty well-being is just sharing ideas of what we do to help students. I think listening to somebody say, I know a student is struggling financially, and so I secretly had a copy of a textbook that I emailed or that I sent the student and told them, just return this book at the end of the semester. Don't worry about buying it. Those little anecdotal stories of how we work with students and deal with those stressors. I think will help faculty, especially new faculty, new to higher ed, but new to education in general. I think that some faculty need permission to reach out and cross that line of faculty student to say it's okay for us to help our students. So that's really where a lot of my desire to participate here comes into play, and then to help faculty engage students. Recently, we were talking about engaging, and what does engagement look like? And so to help faculty engage students in their learning and help faculty become engaged in their learning, so that we see that there's a difference between a passive faculty who just feeds information to students and that active faculty member who really gets involved. And so that's where my perspective is coming in, is whereas Dr. Farmer is talking about students and working with students, and I want to work with faculty and help faculty do that and build up and support faculty.
Thank you so much. Now we'll move to, was there anything else you had to add, Jim? You're good.
Nope,
Okay.
that's good.
And Dr. Steve Byers, go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity, and I'm getting something from, what we're talking about here, which to me points to the whole idea of holistic well-being. And I think because we work here, and I think students, because they attend here, we often don't pay attention to staff also. It becomes our workplace, our college task place, but higher ed is a culture. And coming to that culture is such a diverse array of responses to coming from your home culture into the university culture. So when I think about well-being, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to help students, reach out to staff. And so to stay balanced and to create better well-being, I think it's important to pay attention to that. I want to talk a little bit about what I mean here, put some meat to the bones here. But, I think even in your heart and mind, thinking about this big system that we're in, big university. I know they're bigger ones, but still, and there's such a variety of responses and reactions to this culture. So it's like putting that in our hearts and minds that this is a specific place with its own history, with its own dynamics. And I think one of them is you have a really caring faculty. I agree with our speakers, because having been around the block and coming back home to Oklahoma and working here, we have a really special sense of student engagement and care. Now that leads into something I want to put on the clock today, and that is how to practice self-care. So number one, we're a culture, we're a community. Keep that in the forefront. We're a specific kind of community. Many things go into that, but we're very caring and outreach. I mean, a lot of times in the grad school in psych and counseling, we've been characterized as being relational, and that's our strength. Frankly, I think that's the culture that we're in, just in general, being a caring and do a lot of outreach. But you have to balance that out with good self-care. So I want to share a few PowerPoint slides to illustrate some of what I've researched, knowing I was coming into this panel, about what's going on at colleges and universities. Now, this isn't exhaustive, and it doesn't include NSU. So I want to talk a little bit about what the landscape is for students, at least, and a little bit about faculty, and then actually lead into how to practice good self-care. So now you would think that this is going to go smoothly, me sharing my screen, but you just never know. So
There you go. We see it.
all right. Yeah. And so this is an interest of mine anyway. But when we decided to do this panel, I'm trying to get it to show my slideshow. No, it's not going to do it. Well, I'll just have to do it this way. So I started taking a look at different research studies, and I think this is so interesting. So again, put meat on the bone here. I want to give a sense of what students are coping with. given COVID, and 20 to 25% of our student body, I think we're probably higher than this. And I always think mental health statistics are underreported, but this is a full quarter, 1 in 5 of college students have encountered, report an increased level of mental health worry and stress given the COVID pandemic. And it's increased worry, both acute and chronic. For psychologists, we pay attention to the, is this like something that's gone on for a long time, or is this something related to the current situation? So it looks like both carrying things for a long time or just in episodes tend to center around this basic needs, fear of basic needs being met. And I thought these were interesting numbers. And again, I think we're not in these stats, but I just want to point out, I think we may have our own specific unique struggles here. Housing, students are worried about keeping housing while they're in college, about being able to pay their bills to keep housing. And then I thought this one was also an important thing to pay attention to: security, what we call psychological safety, and things being normal. You can just count on the day to day. I know as faculty, I've struggled with. And yeah, another thing that stood out in about a dozen studies I looked at, what we do virtually, a lot of times colleges and universities will reach out virtually. Nothing against what we're doing today. I think it's needed. But one thing that stood out is when universities do that, they have to pay special attention to the fact that, we've lost connection, due to isolation. You have to take a special effort in your virtual offerings to be really humane and caring, because a good percentage of students at different colleges turn away from the virtual offerings because they don't feel included or spoken to. So that to me is really big as we move on here at NSU to help students and one another. And then again, 1 in 5 report significant stress in this past year. So I just want to say, here's painting the context of what's out there in the student community. We need to pay really close attention to serving these students and taking care of ourselves. So this next, it's not letting me advance. I'm going to stop the share and then try it again, because this next one I do want people to.
Okay.
Give me just 1 second, see if it'll let me go to, there we go.
Yep.
And so again, this is from some of the research out there. I took a little liberty here and there, but it's important, if you're going to cope and address what's going on, that you basically take care of yourself. And holistic well-being and holistic coping have these different dimensions. You have to pay attention to both mental and emotional well-being, occupational well-being, take care of the physical, pay special attention to, and I think this is for all of us, but especially for students, and educating students about this stuff and speaking to this with them. I know I've done this with students one-on-one, much more so in these last 2 semesters, and creating a trusting environment so they can talk about things like they're struggling with money. Social well-being, that's a big one, because again, the isolation. And then I think both students and faculty, we can teach our students to do it. We can help each other to be more active in planning and doing what I call a personalized coping plan. And oh yeah, it's letting me do it now. So, and so here I'll close and make a few general comments and turn to our next speaker. But I feel it's important because I don't think in our country we even think about self-care, right? And I'm not going to do a survey of panelists and faculty, but we want to take care of our students. We've got to take care of ourselves. Staff can practice better coping and well-being, but self-care is so important, and that's personalized. You got to figure out what works with you. Balance the self-care. Given the diversity out there, there's so many ways to do it. So I think it's so important to figure it out yourself, what works best for you. I know for me, the gym is better. Then I tried to use I'm in a complex here, and so I thought I'd save some money and start working out at the small workout room here. And I just became frustrated. I'm like, Steve Byers, you need to pay that fee to get in a gym. So, and there's so many little things like that that you have to kind of experiment with and tweak to get something that really works for you. Of course, walking, getting outside. But I think you have to also acknowledge and avoid what I call a tacit awareness of stress. It's like, oh yeah, it's stressful, then back to work. You've got to really stop and say, here's how I'm going to address it, and seek out support to help think and plan your way through that. The busy world of college should be countered with what I call mindful and grounding practices. Some people talk about Tai Chi, mindful walking, breath exercises, where you do deep breathing. And then your mindset, it's subtle, but we need to pay attention to how we think about mental health. This is a big thing in the mental health research, not just in colleges, that we often don't even put mental health or things like self-care on our radar. And then the last thing here, we have to plan and do. You got to be behavioral. You got to do things. It's not just keep it, in your mind and think about it and plan about it. You've got to actually get the somatic part in it, get the body in there and actually do some stuff. I think I'm out of time.
Thank you so much. These are all so helpful and really inspiring to motivating. Dr. Christine Hallman, would you like to go ahead?
All right, great. I'm really grateful to be on this panel and be part of this conversation on campus-wide for faculty, staff, and students. And so I'm appreciating all these different perspectives here. For what I'm going to share, I guess it's more kind of applied within the classroom and building out. And I'm going to share my screen. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about building a community in the classroom and some specific things that I do to try to do that. It goes back to what Steve was saying about trust and building that safe place for students to be able to share who they are and be a source for them to basically interact with, and like Suzanne said, to help them with resources and point them in the right way. And so these are really kind of specific, and some might say small things that you can do. And it starts in the beginning of the first week of class. I introduce myself to each student, pre-COVID with a handshake, post-COVID with an elbow, if they're willing. And then online, and I use language like this is our class. We're building this together. We're creating something organic together, and offer opportunities for students to suggest topics and concepts from the first day of class. And we build the class with them and their topics that they choose. And it works easier for some classes than with others, but this also allows students to feel like they are a part of the class and also building it together. And then by the first week, they're also interacting with each other and completing experiential activities of some sort. Those are shared experiences that are the foundation of a community. And this, I'm not an Indigenous person, but it goes back to this concept that I've learned from students, a Cherokee concept called Gadugi. And what that is how we relate to each other, how we care for each other and take care of each other. And it's kind of like my working philosophy or foundation for each course. And it starts with small things. One of those small things is a slide that I share in the first lecture, and it just basically is a visual representation of me. This is a way to engage with students and for them to find something to connect through, whether that's I'm a first generation college graduate, or I'm a farm girl from Kentucky, or I like Star Wars, or what have you. And it's a small way to kind of start that interaction, and it makes me more real to the students. Another way to kind of engage students is to start out a lecture or conversation with these open-ended questions, like, what do you know? How is this related to that? How do you define this? What's your experience with this? You know, like, have you seen a tornado? And then start that conversation. It's an opportunity for discussions to start in the beginning, but it also is a way for me to evaluate where students are and how I can take what they already know and build from that. And if there's misconceptions, how I can adjust to what they already know, as opposed to me giving them information and they're just an empty bucket. We build on that framework that they already have. Another way is through language. Language is extremely important. It shapes our worldview, and it's how we communicate who we are with the world. And this is from my water issues class this semester. The first day of class, I show the slide and I ask students if their language isn't represented on the slide, then let me know and we'll add that. It's a great way to acknowledge and show respect to students' identity and culture in a different way. Plus, we all learned a handful of words. These all happen to be words for water. And then this is just a short list of some other small things that I try to do is reminders. I know due dates are on Blackboard, they're on the syllabus, but particularly for the online classes, I give them a to-do list on Monday and then a to-do list on Friday, and students really love that. The next one there is hello and thank you. And you're like, well, yeah, duh, yeah. But what I mean here is once a student shares that they speak another language, then from then on, when we email each other, I use whatever their word for hello and thank you is. And then when I send out mass emails, I have a string of hellos and a string of thank yous. It's yet another way to embrace our diversity and celebrate that. I use a lot of humor. I love corny jokes, and I make fun of myself all the time. I have lots of material, and that humor weaves together with stories. So I talk about, you know, my experience in a mosh pit and how that relates to weather processes. I also hand out candy, which I've done for almost 2 decades. And I used to only do this once a week until I found out that that's all a student had for lunch that day. And after that, I hand out candy whenever I can. We also have a lot of guest speakers and storytellers in our class. These are great because they extend our community outside of the classroom, and guest speakers share their stories, their ideas, perspectives. They inspire students. Students can ask them questions and relate to them on different levels than they can to me. They're really important in the classroom. And go outside. I think Steve mentioned this. It promotes connection to the environment, and it also has a variety of health benefits. Go outside when you teach class, or even encourage those online students to go outside and experience that. Be open to suggestions. Students offer suggestions all the time about homeworks and activities, but not necessarily their grades, but which activities to do and homeworks to do. And because I was open to those ideas, I've incorporated student homeworks that they've designed into classes. Also, opportunities to be creative, express themselves, and for reflection are extremely important. We know that creativity is like the highest level of learning and thinking. You're applying, evaluating, and synthesizing all this stuff, and you're creating something new through you. And that's an incredible learning experience, and reflecting on what they learn and applying it to different situations is pretty incredible. All this fundamentally goes into creating that community. And to listen, not just listen, but actively listen and be in the moment when a student's talking to you, and remember what they say and try your best to point them in the right direction, but accept who they are and be there for them in that moment. Be grateful. When guest speakers visit the class, we give them a small gift, and then students sign a thank you card. This also creates this idea of being thankful in the community and outside. And then after every in-person class, I also thank students for being there, for participating, for staying awake. And at the end of the semester, thank them for allowing me to do something that I love, which is teach. Collaborate with students, faculty, staff, outside of campus. Students really love to make posters to celebrate women veterans. They really like to make window visits to long-term care facilities. I have extended my community on campus by working with librarians, working with Marcy Mitchum on a lot of projects. And it's really important because it also extends your community and reinforces this idea of doing good and how that helps our community. And finally, to be brave enough to learn from students and be brave enough to fail. Be brave enough to learn from your mistakes and understand that this teaching thing is a process. It's an evolution, and we are all forever and always teachers and learners in our community. That's just a few things. Thank you for allowing me to share some of those with you. And I'm gonna stop share and pass it back to Farina.
Thank you so much. These have been so enlightening and just really exciting. I'm already jotting down so many notes and have great ideas just from this short time we have together. So I'm really looking forward to, in the future, we plan to have more smaller snippets and highlights, and maybe even 10 minutes long or about 30 minutes or so. So there's a lot of different angles, approaches, as you can hear from the variety of what each panelist has already shared. And it sparks a lot of questions and ideas and experiences that we can learn from and grow from, which is so wonderful. So thank you very much. Wado Ahyehe, thank you so much. I love that about the language too, Christine. But if folks do have any questions with some of our live attendees who are a part of our NSU community, I will be moderating the chat, so you can do that. Again, this is live and recorded, so you have to accept that. And if you want to verbalize it yourself, just be aware that your image will be recorded as we're trying to share this wonderful, very insightful information with as many of our NSU community as possible. And I can just tell these are the types of conversations that are so important across the board at NSU and beyond, right? As a lot of different faculty and communities are facing these same challenges and questions and issues. So it's wonderful to learn from you all. I just can't repeat that enough. But in terms of some questions, maybe a way to bring up, I don't know if each of you had some pointers. I noticed there were some comments in the chat that not everyone can see, but if you had particular questions for each other or insights that were that came to mind as you heard from your colleagues here, what did you want to bring up, or a certain question or a comment, feedback following up from hearing each other speak as you're listening to each other? And I don't know if you want to, we're in the raise the hand because of this funny panel lineup in the Zoom mode here. I don't know, something came up. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to do that.
Raise the hand.
Yeah. No, I'm sitting here warm-hearted that we've done this, and just a real great array of information. And but I really appreciate the idea of creating that welcoming environment. And as everyone presented, but when Christine was talking about, well, sharing those images in her PowerPoints, I started counting up the ways I've changed my courses, and I've talked about, this is our creation. This is organic. I learn from you, you learn from me. And then the other thing I've done as a faculty is just created I need to take my own advice because I'm probably overextending, but I just this morning, I said, look, we can't get everybody the office hours to work. Most of the grad students work during the day. And when I teach undergrad hours and have office hours, then they can't make it. So I just set up some extra open office hours, because I know they've got a big paper coming. But I think I'd like to see what other people have done, but I think I've changed stuff this past year pretty substantially. And I'm just becoming aware of that, toward that inclusive well-being type of uh, thinking in that model. But yeah, and Christine, your stuff was just like, yeah, yeah. I'm not as adept in it, but I know I've made steps to just create a different. We used one thing, faculty, a number of us, and I really resisted it, but we created floating due dates last semester because so many students were getting behind. And a group of us actually talked it over, and it was like, okay, we'll just turn it in by this date. And the students were just like, they were raising those hands and applauding and all that stuff, it just helped them so much. But anyway, so I'm wondering how other people have modified.
Thanks, Steve, for that question. I think that's an important one that also comes from everyone is we are in a particular context, of this pandemic, of also already concerns that people had, natural disasters that happen, the inclement weather. So there's that navigating how we care for our community and the students, but what has been brought up by all of you as well in some way or another is our self-care. And even the concrete, basic examples of navigating deadlines. I tell my students, we have deadlines for our sanity because we're working within these structures of a 16-week. But so what's that balance too? How do you find the balance of, a floating deadline? What does that mean? I'm having a session about ungrading with the Pacific Coast Historic Branch Teaching Committee actually next week. So I did post that on our NSU Community Health and Wellbeing page, and you can look at that because some are talking about how do we change as well from this punitive kind of appearing system, what can we do? So that I'm excited for those kind of conversations that we can learn from colleagues beyond NSU. What are other institutions doing too? Some of the practices brought up as well, especially from Steve's presentation, such as the grounding, reference to meditation. We are initiating, that I want to announce here before I forget it, that we are initiating a series of different opportunities, events, gatherings, and we did have our first NSU Community Health and Wellbeing meditation session. They're short, 30 minutes, and that was on Monday with Dr. Cheryl Vanden Handel, and she's leading another one on Friday at 3:30. So you can look on our Facebook page for those most up-to-date notifications and information of how to access those. And it was wonderful. I went because even when I get on Zoom, I just want to multitask and do everything, get on my email, whatever. So to stop and listen to yourself breathing actually is so releasing, so helpful and very meaningful. And that was a great experience. And we had faculty and staff coming to that. As I talked about with Christine earlier, we've talked to our student government organization, and we look forward to involving students more and hearing from them. They know their needs, right? And how do we listen and talk to them? So we're looking forward to the opportunities there. And they recently told us that the NGSA, I don't want to mix up the letters, they launched a meal voucher program. So when students, because of that high food insecurity that's happening, they have meal vouchers that students can get. They're in the University Center basement of the Tahlequah campus. So this is something we have to navigate as well. We have different campuses and students beyond Tahlequah. Steve's at Broken Arrow, for example. But there are these initiatives such as the meal voucher that students can get a meal in the cafeteria, which is all you can eat. So check that out. I think it's also, how do we deal with the taboos that some of you are talking about? Some brought up the economic or financial struggles students are facing, the food insecurities where students don't want to share that. How do we deal with those sensitivities? And then Christine mentioned, and this is also brought up by Steve, of nature walks, getting outside. Christine will be leading some nature walks beginning on March 10th, and maybe she might want to talk about that. But I'll open it up. I saw Jim had his hand raised. Did you want to add something, Jim?
Well, I was just going to say, I love the fact that while we all came from a little bit different perspective, there's a connection with everything, you know, and especially Steve tying it together with this well-being sense of idea, you know. I really had to change the way that I do things last year. And that's been a good thing. You know, I forced myself to stop working at a certain time, and rarely do I work on the weekends outside of this small windows when I know students are needing some help. But you know, that the pandemic changed that, and it forced me to change my schedule. And so I think that goes to that mental health of, you know, separating work life from family life from personal life, because now we're suddenly find that we're doing it all in the same space. And that was a hard transition to figure out that I need to have these three distinct areas in this same space. And I also look forward to working with Christine, and I can see us exchanging some podcasts and stories about engaging students. I took notes as well looking at her, and I can talk about engaging faculty. And so we'll look at it from different perspectives, but I can see some future podcasts with that and working with Christine on that.
Awesome, exciting. Some point
Yeah.
into Julia. Oh, sorry, Julia had a
No, go
question,
ahead.
then we'll come back to
Yeah.
Steve.
Yes, I think this is a great community, and I think it will be really helpful to have like administrators such as Julia, who's attending, and Cambiano is attending, and I think it's great that we talk about all this, but we also want to have the administration recognize the importance of the balance, because a lot of times, especially when we are teaching online, it becomes 24 hours, 7 days a week. And a lot of administrators would think that we should answering students as soon as possible within hours. However, if you really take your weekend off, then the students will be waiting. So there is a balance as to what is urgent matter versus what is not urgent matters in terms of answering those emails. And so it's good that we talk about being mindful and being able to separate work and as well as our personal life. But we also want the administration to endorse it. And that way, it's like we encourage our students to have the balance. And then we are encouraged by our administration to have that balance. Then that way we will be able to create a culture together. And I think shows that meditation meetings, those are great opportunities to be shared with the NSU community. And thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Julia. Do you mind saying briefly your introduction? I know you're a professor of finance based in Broken Arrow, but if there was anything else to introduce, you know, your role at NSU for those who are less familiar.
I'm the department chair of accounting and finance. And so I work with the College of Business and Technology, and my upper administration boss is a very good boss, but I know that not all the bosses are great. So sometimes they work really hard, and we really would like them to promote a culture of that balance.
Thank you. I think those are really great points. Thank you so much, Julia, for adding that input. And absolutely with the this collective, we're trying to pay attention as well to what's already happening on campus, great initiatives. I know Julia Carlo, who you referred to, and Morgan Grovenberg, they have a set of webinars this week I'll be attending and have tried to share about Civitas. So I know if they're on, and I can watch the chat if they want to add anything. And so we try to promote these are opportunities to support student success, and how it also takes, you know, it's not just student success, it's all this interconnectedness that Christine was talking about, Suzanne, with the networking and communities and knowing, you know, these support systems. And so absolutely, I will be following up, and I have already been in touch with Julia and Morgan and others to hear, you know, how can we highlight, also inform. I think there's that need of awareness too about what all these different parts of our community, how they work, the kind of resources we have that Suzanne started us off with, because a lot of us aren't even aware of that. Maybe an orientation at the beginning of coming in as new faculty, it's a crash course, but that can be overwhelming and not everything said there, right? I don't know if others have aspects to add to that. Steve, you sorry, we weren't able to hear the point you wanted to add, or if it was related to something else.
No, that's good. I was, we're fine.
Okay, I don't know if others have any response. We have 1 minute here, so if someone had anything else they wanted to add to what has been brought up today as we wrap up. Okay, wonderful. Well, this has been a wonderful, again, that's my word today, wonderful. I'm just so happy of having this conversation. It means a lot, and thank you so much. We, as everyone has said, there are so many demands on us, any individual. This is challenging. We say a challenging time, and as a historian, you know, Dr. Farmer and I, we think about many challenging times throughout history, pandemics, world wars, and different aspects. So it's every day is a good day. It's a beautiful moment, and I'm inspired how Chief Wilma Mankiller, that was a major mantra of hers. And it's wonderful to be here at an institution with this heritage and the uniqueness of it, but also how our common humanity and experiencing that and facing that. So I look forward to hearing more little, you know, in our little snippets, opportunities to have highlights of these different areas brought up today. And we thank you all for joining us. We'll wrap up here, and I'll stop the recording first.